It's just really frustrating.
It does, let me know. But you're right, because then there's this.
It's just the riff that, yeah, like, I don't know. Weird.
Great, Ben Benoit, can you hear us? Can you say something again, Ben Benoit? I don't know if we can hear you.
I can hear you, Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. That's great. These are, mics are sensitive. All right, we will call the meeting to order for the Board of County Commissioners for Utah County for August 23rd, 2023. We typically start these meetings with a prayer, reading, or thought, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have anybody from the audience who's willing to share with us a prayer, reading, or thought? All right, I will nominate Commissioner Gordon.
Thank you.
After that, is there anyone who is willing to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, thank you. Yeah, all right.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful this Wednesday that we have to meet here, and we're thankful for the freedoms and that we enjoy as citizens of this great county. We're grateful for the reasons that we're meeting today and pray that we'll be able to deliberate and discuss the going-ons of this great county. Again, please bless us as we do so. We ask a blessing upon the women and men that keep us safe, our first responders and those that are out on our front lines. Please be with them and their families and bring them home safely, we pray. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Please repeat the pledge after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that I'm Katrina Cole from the Utah County Attorney's Office.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start our meeting with a public hearing. We have a public hearing to discuss amending the 2023 budget in the county's general fund and various other budgetary funds, revising the county's estimates of revenue, revising the budget appropriations of county departments, and or transferring unencumbering or unexpended appropriation balances from one department in a fund to another department in the same fund. We do need a motion to open that public meeting.
Also move.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That public hearing is now open. Do we have any public comment? Anything online, Alice? All right, I will entertain a motion to close that public
So
hearing.
moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That public hearing is now closed. Okay, we will now build our regular agenda. We will hold items. Everything else will be on consent. Items 1 through 10.
Strike 4.
Strike item number 4.
Hold 7.
Okay. I have no others.
Okay, hold number 7. Okay, items number 11 through 20.
None for me.
None for me.
All right. 21 through 23.
I'd like to hold 21.
Yep.
All right. Okay. We'll hold item number 21. And then as far as closed sessions go, we will need to hold item number 24, strike items 25, 26, and 27. Okay, Alice, you want to repeat that back to us?
You bet. Okay, I have us striking agenda item number 4, holding 7, 21, and then as far as closed meetings, we're going to hold as stated 24, and striking 25, 26, and 27.
That is correct. Okay. That brings us to item number 7. Approve and authorize the signing of a resolution amending the 2023 Utah County budget.
Commissioners, my name's Rudy Livingston. I'm the budget manager for the county. We're providing this item today mainly for a couple of reasons. First, We have to move some ARPA funding that was approved previously from ARPA funds into two different CIP funds. That's one of our biggest ones. We also need to make an adjustment in the general fund for salary and benefit expenditures because the market study results came in higher than what we had anticipated and what we had budgeted for in the 23 budget, about a little over $600,000 higher. In addition to that, we have a couple of other items. Our sales tax revenues are running a little bit lower than what we had anticipated, and so we're proposing that we actually make an adjustment at this time to reduce the budgeted sales tax revenues by $3 million. So those are the high-level things, but we have some individual items in here. One item that I do want to offer up is a correction. There is an item that we're making an increase of the budget for the recorder's office for $275,000 to cover additional costs that have been incurred due to the contract that they're for the renovation here. In here, we made a note that we were going to take $70,000 from an existing furniture budget to cover that. That's a miscommunication. I misunderstood that. I believed that that amount was coming out of the money that was being paid for through Public Works, and it was not. This is an amount that's being paid directly from the recorder's office. So we cannot use that $70,000. And what that does is it increases the use of fund balance in that particular fund to $275,000 instead of $204,000.
Okay, and that is reflected in the memo. I believe.
It's reflected in there. We just thought that we're going to have less in use of fund balance. So yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just
so it won't affect this year's budget?
It will not affect this year's budget, and it's going to be, the expenditure number that we're asking for is correct. Other than that, the one thing that we are asking for increases in expenditures in the general fund, and these will be paid for out of fund balance, which would be about $653,000 use of fund balance, in addition to the $3 million decrease, which would result in using fund balance. There's another item on here related to the Public Defender's Office, which our department is neutral on this, and we're leaving it out there. There's been a request submitted to fund $423,820 additional to Public Defender's contract. We, as a department, are not taking an opinion on this. If the commission decides that they want to do this and fund this from general fund resources, that would end up with a net resulting $1,077,000 use of fund increase in the use of fund balance for these items that we're proposing today.
Okay, so that's summarized on the first paragraph of the conclusion on page 2.
That
right?
is correct.
So
Yes.
with the recommended changes, we're looking at a use of fund balance of $6,729,300. And then if we choose to do the public defender one, you're looking at use of a fund balance of $7,153,120, correct?
Yes.
Am I understanding correct on that?
Yeah, that's the last sentence of that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, is there anything else you wanted to highlight for us?
Nope, those are the only items that I have.
Okay, thank you.
My question was, is there value to use from general fund balance as opposed to using ARPA or LATC funds to cover 2023's Indigenous Defense Fund?
Is that a question of me or your fellow commissioners?
I raise it up for the other commissioners. We've got roughly 802,000 in ARPA that's unobligated. We've got almost $692,000 in unobligated LATCF. So we have to use the 802 between now and by the end of June. And we have to address the imbalance regardless. I know that, but I'm thinking in terms of either revenue replacement or outright covering the difference in the defense fund with ARPA.
So my only concerns with that is that we currently have, like one of the transfers that we're making here is $30 million from ARPA to the CIP for current projects that we approved on the CIP. And I could foresee us needing some of that 800,000 to
Toward
cover
inflation.
towards inflationary costs on those. The other is I think there are some potential other things that we could use that for, like implementation of software. I know we've got a couple of other systems that we had originally asked the IT department to work on, that they are now looking at outsourcing some of those things, and that could be used as one-time costs for implementation for software. And I really do like to stick with the rule of thumb, using one-time monies for one-time costs. Utilizing the ARPA funds, that is a stopgap, but I would rather use it for inflation on existing projects that have already been approved, and/or implementation, which is one-time fees for one-time expenses.
Yeah, no, I can't argue with the reasoning. I appreciate that. We've talked about that a couple times. I just want to bring it up this one last time because we have used ARPA for stopgaps for the Children's Justice Center and the county attorneys for the victims of crime functions there. And we have some grants that have stopped from Congress for our Children's Justice Center that have yet to be addressed, and we'll have to look at that as potentially becoming a general fund item, because we cannot let those die.
Yeah.
So, but I'm happy to support that determination. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it sounds like we both agree, Tom and I, and that this 400,000 should be awarded to the public defenders. I wasn't quite sure how you were feeling on that. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess my point is there's some 80 taxing entities in the state of Utah holding truth in taxation this year, right? And the conversations that we've had is funding this right now means we go forward funding it, right?
Yes.
And with that idea of that the 275,000 for the recorder's office is an overage on their project, as we've seen on most all of, these projects lately. It just is rotten how the inflation has just been really kicking our butts. So I think we all agree, on funding it, it sounds like, but I probably am less likely to fund it out of the remaining 800.
And no, I'm happy. I just wanted to bring it up one last time before we completed
Yeah,
this. But
and I think that's something that, I see you do a lot and do well, constantly looking at the funding portions of how do we get there.
how do I balance this checkbook?
But this guy right here, right, he helps us really, right, get to when we say we want to do this, or, it's a necessity in our minds, then to bring up this parity in the indigent defense services, then, you'll help us.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is exactly what Commissioner Powers-Gardner mentioned, is that, and I think Commissioner Sakovic as well, is that we realize that what this is going to result in is a need for additional funding in the future. And the reality is you can hope that sales tax and other revenues go up, but the reality is that what it really means, if we're going to fund these on an ongoing basis, we probably need to be looking at truth in taxation. Mm-hmm. And have moderate, not huge increases in the property taxes. We don't want some gigantic one. We want to have moderate ones to keep up with inflation and the other costs that are happening in the county. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've been kicking this idea around of a recession kicking in. There's been argument whether or not we were in one or not for months, and now we're getting evidence that we may actually be in one. So, of course, gasoline's only $4.25 low end in most places now instead of $3 something. So,
Right. So, my thoughts on this is I feel like I have an episode of Groundhog Day. When I became the county auditor in 2019, we had been running a structurally imbalanced budget for 4 years in the middle of a booming economy, not even a recession. And I am looking at a structurally imbalanced budget of a minimum of $6.7 million in the general fund. If this passes, that's a $7.1 million structurally imbalanced budget this year. And we're only funding half of this increase for this year. Plus, this is not going to be the last increase. Last week, I had a lunch with the Chamber of Commerce where we had a presentation by an economist who talked about the average wage pressures in the Rocky Mountain region, particularly here in our county, is at 4%, which means that we're staring down a 2024 budget of an additional 4% increase. Part of this increase includes wage pressure increases. So if we double the public defender's request for next year, that's an additional $400,000 on top of that, not including an inflationary increase. That puts us at a $7.5 million deficit. We have roughly $50 million in our fund balance right now. So back of the napkin math, we're only a few years away from bankruptcy. By the way, the only reason we have $50 million in that account is because the federal government printed a whole bunch of money and handed it to us through CARES Act and ARPA to the tune of almost $240 million. And the federal government in the last 3 years has given us $240 million, and we only have $50 million of it left over in our fund balance. We are not a structurally balanced budget. It is not conservative to not raise taxes, but then to spend out our credit lines and our credit. I look at us as conservative Republicans constantly criticizing Washington, D.C. and calling it a swamp because they spend more than they bring in. And here we sit with a $7.1 million potential deficit. Now, do I 100% sit with the Public Defenders Association and their need for an increase? Absolutely. I have been a staunch supporter of criminal justice reform. I believe we do not have a free and fair society if we do not have balanced criminal justice system. I have spoken to that many times, and I have a very strong record of that. But I also don't think it's fiscally sound, fiscally conservative, or fiscally responsible to continue to vote for more spending and more spending and more spending if we're not balancing our budget. On top of the public defender's contract, which I completely agree that they need the money, but we can't always have everything we need. I completely agree that they need the money. I do not fault anyone for voting for it. But we have, as Commissioner Sakovic pointed out, we have positions at the CJC that we're currently funding with ARPA that at the end of 2026, they're going to hit our general fund unless we get rid of them. And honestly, who's going to vote to get rid of victims advocates for children that are abused, right? Like, that's going to hit our general fund. The county attorney has 4 victims advocates right now, 2 of which are funded using ARPA. That runs out in 2026. What are we going to do? Vote to get rid of victims advocates? They also need an additional 4 paralegals to help prosecute crimes and victims of crime that we can't afford to give them, that we need to give them. We have additional wage increases coming for our own employees, our biggest asset that we cannot afford to lose. Plus, inflation is still sitting between 5% and 7% here in our county in the Rocky Mountain region, where traditionally it's been much higher. Plus, on top of all of that, we've got an estimate minimum of $3 million of lost revenue from sales tax this year. So once again, I look at this and we've been running a structurally imbalanced budget. We did a huge tax increase. We're back to a structurally imbalanced budget in 4 years, and we've been given $240 million from the federal government. Like, this is not sustainable. It's not conservative, and it's not responsible. So as much as I see that the public defenders need this money, my vote on that portion is going to be no. But I don't fault anyone for voting otherwise.
Yeah, they've been bleeding lawyers consistently, every 1 lawyer a month this past 6 months, so we've lost 6. And there's a significant imbalance between defenders and the prosecuting side. So we have a problem where the public defenders have now a much larger workload, relatively speaking, than our county attorneys who are assigned similar case files. So I see the need to do this, and I see the need to do this using ARPA intermittently or go with the general fund. I'm more leaning toward general fund.
Now, with that said, I would have no problem voting for this if we could agree that this is fiscally irresponsible and that we're going to do something to correct the irresponsible path that we're on.
Well, I don't.
Well, that's why I brought up, like, I've been part of Truth and Taxation several times as a city councilman, and I understand we always balanced that budget. And sometimes
Absolutely.
it meant not letting the property tax rate fall. And a few times we raised it as a result of that. But that was you know.
That I could get behind. I could, if we are willing to be fiscally responsible and balance our budget, I'm willing to do that. But continuing to run a structurally imbalanced budget is just not an option that I can get behind, continuing to do that more and more.
And I wouldn't call it irresponsible, because I would call it irresponsible if we had a full knowledge that we were doing something that we should not be. We have been waiting for this time to come. It has knocked on our doors pretty loudly the last couple of months, so I can see that it's here. Where do we go from here? That's to be decided. Let's see what the curves do. It may continue to go downward the rest of this year on sales. I don't know. Let's see what the records show out of the state as they continue to refine their reports. But let's move forward with what we know and go forward with that in hand. And that way we can address what we have to do in the coming months and address what we need to do at this time. So I would make a motion that we at least adopt all of this. Well, let me, one minor administrative thing, Rudy. Number 10, capital projects, PPE building. And on the far right, in an explanation, it says emergency management building. I think the PPE was the original concept, but it's expanded to be an emergency management building, which includes a storage building.
That's correct. The initial CIP project was as a PPE
Probably should
building,
just simply
but
change it.
it has changed, and that description needs to be updated, correct?
Okay, all right.
Because you're absolutely correct. It is no longer just a PPE building. It is a whole emergency management building, correct?
Much needed.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it's a motion to adopt.
Okay, and also just mentioning the 70,155, and my only other comment before I second it would be that, yes, I'm in support of knowing that truth in taxation is obviously going to be
That's a very likely
something that's probably
possibility.
likely next year.
I want to see what the numbers show from the state in the next few weeks, months, couple months.
I mean, based upon where we are right now, the numbers that we'll be projecting in the next year's budget will definitely be lower
Okay.
than what we have been. So, I mean, to Amelia's point on that, we'll be looking at that regardless.
Yeah, no, that appears to be the case.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. That passes 2-1. Okay, thank you. We are on to item number 21.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Greg Robinson from Community Development. Just to give you a little background, the Faraday Solar Development was approved, is a conditional use that was approved in two parts. The first area was approved in 2020, and an additional area was approved in 2022. The acreage that was approved was about 6,800 acres. The project boundary that they're proposing to develop was about 5,200 acres. It is a solar facility that's probably, that the capacity is about 682 megawatts of power. It's quite a large area. Part of the conditional use was a requirement to have a decommissioning plan to remove all structures, electrical equipment, foundations, internal or perimeter access roads, and the restoration of soil and vegetation of disturbed areas, along with a plan to ensure financial resources will be available to fully decommission the site. So that's what the decommission, or that's one of the conditions of the conditional use. And so we are bringing the decommissioning plan that was submitted by Clenera, and also the parent guarantee that they're proposing to use to ensure that the financial resources to decommission that site will be available. I know that we have the attorney's office here to kind of discuss the parent guarantee. If you have questions about the solar facility, or the decommissioning plan, I'm happy to answer those.
18,851,778.
Correct.
That is the amount that they are proposing to decommission after 50 years.
Yep, that's the amount that they're proposing that will cost them to decommission that site. One of the attachments included the salvage value of that they initially proposed. That's one of the ways that they balance some of those costs. But yeah, the amount that they're proposing that it would cost to decommission the site, and that would be based on the amounts are based on kind of labor costs at 2022, 2023 rates. And it's a 25-year, I think, is kind of the numbers that they're looking at. But I think that my anticipation is that this will probably go longer than 30 years, but that's kind of up to Clenera and the developer. And they are here also to discuss this if you have questions about that. So
I had asked earlier through Ben and Dale that the thing that I was concerned about, and maybe I missed it, but I don't see anything built in for inflation. So the $18 million might not be anywhere near what it would take, or we would see the value out of it. The candy bar was 33 cents when we moved here in 2006. It's now $1.30 something.
What? I got to challenge that.
Very, very-
2006, 33 cents?
Yes. Go to Walmart. That's where it was.
Wow, that was pretty good, Tom. I got to start. I just had to challenge that.
Well, it's crucial.
Candy
It's
bar guy.
a major nutritional source of food here. We got to keep that in mind.
I
I
apologize.
mean, if you get hangry, a
You
Snickers
know me.
bar
You know me.
does.
Okay.
But the point here is that the inflation, is it actually addressed where it's allowed that, taking into account inflationary impact so that by the time it's decommissioned, it would be the future dollar rate, not 2023's rate?
right, it does not address that in the decommissioning plan. There are a couple of things that kind of would, in a way, address that. One is that the lease agreements that they have with the property owners requires them to remove all structures, and also the conditional use requires them to remove all structures. The financial resources available, you're very correct that this does not include inflationary costs as far as that goes, but there are conditions both with the property owners and with the county to require them to remove it. It's just that this is what they're proposing as their financial resource to be available.
The other thought I had is does this impact any future plans for communities that are being conceptualized on the map so far in that general area?
Sure. So at this time, the area that they're looking at is about 7,400 south and about 18,000 west in the Cedar Valley area. It is not part of any annexation plan, either Eagle Mountains or Fairfields. Those are the closest two communities. We don't anticipate this getting to the point where any development surrounding this anytime in the near future. So unless something dramatic changes, it should be still pretty isolated after 30 years, is what I would anticipate.
Well, since we moved back in 2006, Spanish Fork ain't what it was.
There you go. I like that.
True.
It ain't. And
Very
one of the things
surprised.
I get teased a lot about is having a passion for garbage and sewer, and government. But I like to know where things go after I flush it, and I like to know that my can gets picked up, right? And so one of the things I've been involved a lot in is garbage, and my friends in the garbage industry say we don't have a really good plan for what we do with solar panels after their life, but I think that in 30 to 50 years, hopefully sooner than that, we're working on those plans, right? And having been part of a decommissioning between Spanish Fork and the county of a metal salvage yard next to the rodeo arena in Spanish Fork and the current transfer station in Springville. I used to chair that board, and they're going to be decommissioning that site. I've tried to kind of wrap my head around how we get to this site getting returned to its existing state. And before we get there with you, I guess I don't get so hung up on how much it costs. I want to make sure that it gets put back the way it was. But I want guarantees that the money is going to be there to do that. Sure. So if they say it's 18 million, is that going to be put in the bank? Are we going to get a bond? Are we going to have escrow? All of those types of things. So those are my questions.
Right, and that's probably best addressed by the attorney's office and Clenera. So
Okay.
I'll let them
Thanks, Greg.
kind of
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dale Air, County Attorney's Office. So Clenera was aware that the CUP requires them to give us a plan for financial resources to be available. They chose to present a parent guarantee, where the company that owns Clenera will actually guarantee that the money will be there to fund the decommissioning. You know, it's a viable option. I'm sure it's used in many, many cases in the financial world. A little bit of a concern to us. The parent is Excelsior Renewable Energy Intermediate Fund Number 1. It's a Delaware limited partnership with approximately $460 million in assets. But you know, only a crystal ball will tell us if that limited partnership will be available 10 years, 30 years down the road. But since the permit was granted, we have to find a way to agree on what the financial resources are going to look like. And so it's really up to you to decide what will we accept. The conditional use permit was not entirely helpful there. A plan ensuring financial resources will be available. You know, it would have been nice if it said a bond or an escrow, you know, to be very specific. Of course, it's hard to be specific when you're that on the front end of a project and propose things like that. It also impacts the applicant. We have to be concerned. We have to consider where they're at. You know, they've gone forward with this CUP with an understanding that this is how much it's going to cost, and this will make it affordable, and so we're going to have to deal with them on that. So I just thought, you know, I'll give you kind of some ideas on is this a good idea or not. Some pros to a parent guarantee: it's a well-funded parent company. Obviously, they have interest in a lot of renewable energy projects across the country, a lot of assets. I can't speak to whether it's a good company or not. I don't know how to read financials. We provided them to you if you do, but that's something we might want to look into. The CUP only requires financial resources, so it does not say exactly a bond or an escrow. The private property leases do contain decommissioning provisions, which means the private property owners can sue to clean up the property. So I guess it's going to be a future burden that we'll share with the private. We're of course want to protect them as much as we can when we allow these projects to come in, but they also have some recourse to make sure their property is cleaned up. The predicted salvage value is more than twice the cost. So someone will be, assuming all of those numbers are correct, the industry continues to be able to salvage these solar panels, someone would be interested in the decommissioning if it were to happen today or tomorrow. Because according to those numbers, they'll make money in the salvage, in the decommissioning. But there is a downside. Limited partnerships, notoriously volatile. They're designed to isolate, insulate, and implode if necessary to protect the partners. The assets, they're renewable energy projects with uncertain futures. So if you look at the financials, you'll see a list of all their assets. It's all renewables. How do you know if those assets are going to continue to be worth what they are today? The CUP, a downside is the CUP did not give us that specific requirement of a bond or an escrow. And there's no way to predict the future decommissioning costs, salvage and viability, or profitability of a solar project. I think it's important for you to know this was the first attempt. We haven't spent any time negotiating. We haven't spent any time discussing this. This is what Clenera brought forward. They're telling us this is an industry standard, that all solar farms, all solar projects use these parent guarantees, which could be true. We, of course, do not have the experience or expertise in solar farms to know if that's true or not. We haven't investigated any alternative funding mechanisms for the decommissioning, which is a possibility. There is a timeline, though. You need to be aware. There's a timeline. The conditional use permit has been granted. They have a development schedule. They have to stay on schedule to meet their funding requirements. Roads are already being built. We've allowed those roads to go forward, but at some point, we're going to have a decision on the decommissioning plan before we can permit the actual building of the solar project. So having confused and muddied the water, can I answer any questions?
That was helpful.
Yeah, I've got some questions. When we talk about the cleanup and the mitigation, and maybe this is a question for community development, can you explain to me why is this necessary? I mean, is there radiation that will occur on the neighboring properties if it isn't cleaned up? Is there environmental hazards that could occur on the ground if it isn't cleaned up? I mean, the lease that they have with the property owner is to clean up. So what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a private property owner and I'm seeing a privately held corporation, and they're entering into a contract. And I'm wondering what the impact on the public is that we as a government are getting ourselves involved.
If you're talking about
What's the public interest in there if it's private property and the private property owner has agreed to use their private property for that purpose, and it's not currently impacting like a neighbor because of undue zoning that would impact the neighbor? And I'm trying to figure out why we are inserting ourselves. Is there like a negative impact on the public? Is there like radiation that could occur? Is there environmental damage that could occur? Is there an additional cost to the taxpayers if we didn't? Help my libertarian leaning roots understand why government is getting involved in this.
I'll do to you what my son does to me. Yes. All of that. Our job is the health, safety, and welfare of the people of Utah County. And anytime.
Yeah, right, and I'm trying to figure out how does this impact the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Utah County?
And so it's just like all of our zoning, all of our development rules. They're designed to protect the current owners, future owners, all surrounding owners, and all citizens that might use or be connected to that property.
Right.
So what we're trying to prevent is 50 years from now when our kids are living here and is it really 6,800 acres of panels?
approved area. So
Oh, okay.
could be
And then
52.
5,000 acres of panels just sitting in an area that someday will be developed. And I think that the worst case scenario is 50 years from now, there's a bunch of people like us sitting around. Clenera is defunct. The property owners have walked away because they can't afford to do it. And we have 5,000 acres of solar panels sitting there. And what do we do with it? And I think at that point, in fact, I could guarantee that there would be a group of people standing in front of 3 commissioners saying, we demand that you do something about this. And we'll end up doing it. That's what I think happens in government. We end up cleaning up other people's problems.
Right, so you're assuming at that point that the property owners have defaulted on their taxes for 5 years in a row and we've reclaimed the property. I mean, I'm trying to figure out why, what's the government's role
No more
here?
walking away. Just private property owners walking away saying, I can't afford to do this. I don't know what to do with this. And so they just leave it there. And then someone, a group, property owners, whoever, citizens, cities that have grown up and annexed around it are saying, someone has got to do this. And so they either look at federal, state, or county government to clean it up. That's kind of worst case scenario, projecting way out what we would see.
And that's assuming that at that point, 50 years from now, at 2050, we're estimated to have 1.3 million people in our valley. And so what you're thinking is there will be development around this facility.
Absolutely.
And so the land values would not be enough to be able to cover the environmental cost of cleanup, is what you're assuming.
That's the worst case scenario, yes, ma'am.
I think at that point, we should make it an HRTZ.
Yeah, it's also unique being the first.
Right.
It's our first. We don't want to mess up on that, right? We want to make sure that we
Yeah.
get it right.
Are any of the materials used like radioactive materials
not
that
at
would
all. Yeah,
that
sorry.
would pollute the earth?
Yeah. So my name is Dustin Thompson. I work for Clenera. A lot of great quick questions. So these projects not hazardous at all. I would say 90% of this is steel. So they're like steel piers that you drive into a ground with a PD-10, which is like a pneumatical hammer, right? And they drive them in the ground, and then you hook a steel tracking system to the piers, and then you hang the modules on top of that. And so an incredible amount of value in that steel, which is why you see a lot of salvage value.
Oh, so it's not in the
from that.
panels, it's in the steel.
Well, the panels have a lot of value too, because these panels only degrade at 0.5% a year. So we model these like a useful life of 20 to 35 years. After that, you have these panels that are 75% of their life still in them. So what we believe is that there's going to be a secondary market for third-party panels that will be created just by this industry alone. And he referenced recycling. I think there's a lot of DOE money going into efficient recycling of modules, stuff like that as well.
What are the materials that the panels are made of?
Silicon, glass, sand, yeah, all kind of recognized, I don't know, I wouldn't say household, but recognized materials that are used in
Anything
a
known
lot
to
of
the state of
applications.
California to cause cancer?
Oh, yeah. Our transformers have a similar vegetable oil in them, but that's not anything too hazardous.
So like if a panel gets cracked, broken,
There's no leakage or anything like that. No hazardous substance is known to leak, and we have
nothing
data
you're
on
legally
that.
required to disclose to a future property owner?
And we've had it. We've had panels break, and we'll dispose of them and put a new panel on. We have certain spares always.
And your hydraulic oil is a vegetable base, you said?
Yeah.
I guess the challenge I have is if it's 18 million, almost 19 million to decommission, but the salvage rights are more, why would the plan not be to, hey, we'll put $1 million into escrow for you, and that's the plan because we know we're going to recoup type idea.
Escrow is a situation that we've never even experienced. I think we've built like 1.4 or 1.7 to 1.8 gigawatts of projects. We've seen the parent guarantee a lot. We've seen bonds a lot. We've also seen counties just require, hey, just show us a decommission plan so we know that you guys are prepared to clean it up. A lot of that obligation, like you said, is really between the landowner and us, making sure, they have an interest to make sure that their property is left in like an as-is condition. So we commit to essentially giving them their property back the way we got it. And so there's a lot of dialogue and sometimes financial assurances along with that to make sure we perform. And that's wrapped up in our lease agreement with these landowners.
Did your lease agreement include any guarantees? Do you have a parent agreement with them? Do you have any sort of
I believe we do have a decommissioning guarantee with the landowner, yeah. In fact, I know we do.
or do they have any sort of, other than putting in the lease that you'll return the land to previous specs, do you have any sort of a guarantee like a parent plan like you're proposing to us? with them?
No, we're not planning on using a parent guarantee with the landowner. But I think it just like in terms of the value at the end of the useful life, right? This plant, the intent, I think the risk that, this plant goes belly up, right? We negotiate contracts with the utility company and they're fixed, right? So we know exactly what we're going to be making each year for the power based off of production estimates. And so all of our revenue from a pricing standpoint is known, and we're able to model that. And we modeled decommissioning costs for this project as well. So we're planning that in our budget for this project to make sure at the end of its useful life, it's being, cleaned up and moved on.
And in all likelihood, it'd probably be next 10 years, you'll probably have something even better developed, solar panels that you'll want to replace these with the updated versions that come up.
For sure. Yeah. The technology has gotten, I don't know. I remember when I started in this industry like 10 years ago, we were talking about wattages per module that are, half of what we're dealing with now, which increase or decreases the land footprint that you need to build. And the expectation is in another 5 years, 10 years, you're going to have the same jump as new technology
Right.
evolves, for sure.
The solar farm in Spanish Fork is on a landfill, so it's pretty easy, right, to have a different conversation, right? It's like, oh, great, we couldn't really do anything else with that area. But, so I understand
Yeah.
staff's, wanting to see something. And, you mentioned bonding, but, that, as soon as I heard that, I thought that would be a lot more expensive.
It's really expensive.
Yeah.
That's honestly, like, we prefer to not go that route because it is really expensive to hold a bond for 20 to 35 years. With the parent guarantee, it's a lot easier for the parent company to just kind of put the cash aside and warrant and guarantee that on performance of an obligation, right? And that has seemed to work out in the past, but yeah, you're right. Bond is definitely more expensive.
Yeah.
So with this conversation, do we want to continue this item just a couple weeks to tweak a few things here and there and make sure the language is what we think should be in there that we brought up today?
Just so that, to make sure these guys can potentially meet their production deadlines, I would be okay with a continuation of 1 week, but we don't have a meeting in 2 weeks, and I don't want to continue it for 3 weeks. I wouldn't mind seeing what other government entities do. I did ping the folks at ALEC and the Rainey Center to ask them if they had any best practices on this, and I haven't heard back yet. So I would be okay with a 1 week continuation, just so I can see how other government entities handle this.
Would that work, Dale? A week?
I think if I've heard the Community Development Office say, this is the first of what we probably anticipate as many, right? Or more. If not, maybe many's not the right word, but we know this won't be the last one. So I want to get it right.
Yeah, would that be a disruption, 1 week?
We are very sensitive. We're trying to get our building permit. Like I said, we have to build the roads out, and we have a certain timeline that we're obligated contractually to provide power to PacifiCorp by a certain date. And we're already a little bit behind the schedule. Like, I know 1 week's 1 week, but that's just where we're at right now. We're really eager to get out there and start getting vertical on the site.
Yeah. I think 1 week would be okay. Just I don't
We
feel
can
comfortable
continue
with
at a
3.
week, then we can dial in if we want to.
And we're happy to help. Like, we have several projects around the country, and we deal with this quite often. So
That would be very helpful if you
we
have
can-
if you have examples from other government entities. That would actually help us quite a bit.
okay,
I'd be good for 1 week. I can make that motion.
Second.
thank you.
Move in second to continue this item for 1 week. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're going to move to the public comment portion. I don't see any here in person. Alice, is there anybody online for public comment? All right, we'll go to closed session. Thank you.